Hello guys, my name is Desmond and I welcome you to my lesson for today where we will be looking at the mathematics. Ladies and gentlemen, please do allow me to say it is very much important that I say it is very much important because Tando. What I'm about to say, it's massively. Hey, massively important, ladies and gentlemen, that I say a day without learning something new, it's a day wasted. Run this one. Please do make sure that by the end of each and every lesson that I conduct, you learn something new. Very much important, ladies and gentlemen, over there. So, most importantly, as you can see over there, analytical geometry is what we will be looking at in today's lesson. It's our very new chapter that we'll be starting with. We have started with a solve for X type of questions. We have done a number pattern sequence and series. We have done the functions. So this last Saturday, you guys wrote a test of which at a later stage we will do the corrections. But for now, let's move on to the next chapter. So under this chapter, we are going to be looking at the following: a very quick revision on your grade 10 stuff, and then from there we then elevate to your standard where we look at an inclination of a line, and then thirdly we will look at a determination of an equation of a straight line, and lastly that's when we look at the application involving quadrilateral, which is a question paper that was sent in the group. So this is what I'm going to do, honorable members. As always, when I start with a new chapter, what happens is you need to give me an opportunity to do a presentation, of which somewhere in the middle of my presentation, I'm going to allow you guys to participate by either asking questions or otherwise any additional comments in relation to what I will be doing. So a very quick revision of which I'm pretty much sure that most of you guys are familiar with what I'm going to do. That is why I'm going to quickly take you through this revision. Most importantly, what I'll be doing in today's lesson is to prepare you to answer that question paper that was sent in the group. I'm pretty much sure that most of you guys looked at it and you noticed some of the questions might have been tricky, some of the questions might have been difficult, but I'm telling you, if you can listen very carefully and make sure that you fully participate when necessary, you will be at a stage where, towards the end of the lesson, when we discuss that question paper, almost everything is going to make sense. And then from there, in the upcoming lessons, we will only focus on exam type of question papers. Trust me when I say the brain is a very powerful tool. You do not need the whole week to study a chapter. You just need a good explainer, a summarized information, and question papers. So very quickly, I'll take you guys through the distance formula, the midpoint formula, and lastly, the gradient formula, of which you did notice most of these when we're dealing with the functions. But just for the sake of honorable members who have done the high school, let's say, over 10 years ago, just a quick revision so that reba squeezer E, if you get what I'm saying. So now, quickly, the distance formula. So the distance formula says D it's equals to, remember, the moment we talk about the distance, you should also remember the word length. So length and distance, mathematically, it refers to one and the same thing. Let me quickly. Okay, so I had to quickly attend to something. So now let's see. The moment we talk about the distance, we refer to the length. So that means examiner can use the word distance or length. So now let's see, what does the formula say? So the formula says we've got x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 close squared. Most importantly, what you need to remember is that you only need two things in order to use this formula. You need two things. Let's try to discuss what are those two things that you might need. I'm pretty much sure that all of you guys are familiar with that formula, and it's also given to you in the formula sheet. But most importantly, what you need to remember is that the moment you see yourself using that formula, you will always need two things. What could be those two things? It could be 2 points. Remember, 2 points meaning two coordinates. If not 2 points, then it means you might need 1 point, but most importantly, you must be given either the distance or the length. That's why I'm saying two things. I'm not specifying what things. This is what you might need, and this is also what you might need. Okay, so very quickly, that means for you to use the distance formula on a Cartesian plane, you might be given 2 points, being point A and point B, having the coordinates. It won't come as easy as it looks there. It will somehow be tricky, which is what I need to make you guys aware of. So, number 2, let's quickly have a look at the midpoint formula. Remember, the word midpoint, it simply refers to the middle point between 2 points. Meaning, if you've got a point there and a point there, between point A and point B, there is a middle point. Let me just say a middle point, it's somewhere there. So can you guys see? The middle point between point A and point B is right there in the middle of those 2 points. And we do have a formula to calculate the midpoint. So let's say, for example, this is you there. You are walking from point A to point B. I just want to try and be practical. Let's say the total distance that you need to walk, let's say, is 4 kilometers. So obviously you will realize that this is 0 kilometer because it's the starting point, and this is the 4 kilometer because it is the end point. So now, to calculate that middle point, it's actually a point in between. You already know that the middle point of 2 kilometers, of 4 kilometers is 2 kilometers. But mathematically, how do you calculate that? That is why you are going to say the starting point plus the end point. You have it. Remember, anything, the moment you divide by 2, you are actually getting a half of that whatever. So it's more like this is the whatever and then half of it. So the reason why we divide by 2 on the midpoint formula is because we want to have that total, of which it gives you 2 kilometers. So that's how you visualize what is meant by the middle point. It doesn't matter whether the 2 points have got that angle or the 2 points have got that angle. You just know the middle point between those 2 points is what we call the mid for middle point. So what is the formula? That is why when it comes to the formula, we are going to say, since mathematically a point, it is made up of the coordinates having the x and the y value, having the x and the y value. That is why we say to calculate the middle point, which is going to have the x and the y value, we have a formula for calculating the middle point of the x value being x1 plus x2 divided by 2. Remember, divide by 2 because you have it, and you are also going to have the midpoint of the y value, which is y1 plus y2 over 2. That is why, to summarize, they will just say to calculate the midpoint. For the x value, you're just going to say x1 plus x2 over 2. And then here, y1 plus a y2 over 2. Most importantly, at all the times, the moment you see yourself using that formula, you need 2 things. So that means for distance, 2 things. I'm just confirming now for the distance, 2 things. No, for the midpoint, 2 things. What are those 2 things? It's either you need 2 points or you need 1 point and 1 coordinate. That is why I'm saying the moment you start seeing yourself using this formula, just know you will need 2 things. I can tell you now, Victor Mabulana, analytical geometry is a game of 2 things. Just write it as part of your notes in capital letters and say game of 2 things. Hey, not Game of Thrones, Bantu Bakiti. I'm saying game of 2 things. So it's in most cases where I'm going to say 2 things, 2 things, 2 things, 2 things. So very, very much important that you remember that. Okay, lastly, let's talk about the gradient. Remember, another name for the gradient, you can still say the slope. If you've got a mountain similar to that, from this point up to that point, we can say the gradient generally is gentle as compared to from this point to that point. So the question would be, will it be easy to climb that mountain from this direction or from that direction? And one would say from this direction. Why? Because the slope is gentle as compared to the slope from this side. So that's how you visualize what is meant by the slope or the gradient. So we make use of that by referring to a straight line which could be in that angle or that angle. But most importantly, remember, analytical geometry, a game of 2 things. A game of 2 things. Okay, so very quickly, let's have a look at the formula of the gradient. So also the gradient formula represented by small letter m, capital letter M for the midpoint. It's actually change in y over change in x, which is equals to, whether in physical sciences or mathematics, the moment you see that sign, which is called delta in Greek, it's actually a Greek word referring to change. Delta means change. Even when you get to varsity, for those of you guys who want to study engineering, just like myself who studied civil engineering at UJ, you will come across that sign called delta. And I'm telling you, if you don't understand it now, it's going to mur you big time. So change simply means whatever that you are having here, the second of it minus the first of it. So since we are having y, that's why we're going to say y2 minus y1 over here is the change of what? Change of x. That's why you're going to say x2 minus x1. So that means pabalo. If they say change of p honorable member, this means a P2 minus P1. For example, to be practical in physical sciences, we know pabalo means momentum. So that means it's going to be momentum final minus momentum initial. So final referring to the second minusing the first. So this means change. This is whatever. So it is the whatever 2 minus the whatever 1. Hey, bantu bagiti. I'm not sure if you guys realize that in this case, the moment you use the gradient formula, you will still need 2 things. What are those 2 things? It's either you've got 2 points which won't be easily given to you by an examiner. They will somehow try to be tricky and ask you a question where they want you to use this formula. So let's see. It's either you've got 2 points or otherwise you've got 1 point. And you know, the moment you have 1 point, the other thing that you need, it's actually the gradient itself. So that means in that case, you might be using the gradient formula to determine a point. Massively important, ladies and gentlemen, that at all the times, you pay full attention to details. So that was a very quick revision on your grade 10 stuff. So now we are going deeper. Here comes a question. Can I go deeper? Can I go deeper? Or otherwise, is there anyone who's got a question based on what I've explained over there before we now move on to the second point being inclination of a line? Any questions? Or can I go deeper? Ibandla lakaNkulunkulu.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
I'm sorry, just wanna make sure for distance we need two two things, right?
Yes.
Is it your points and what was the other one?
So it's either you're given 2 points or you are given 1 point and the answer. Yeah, I think let me summarize it this way. As part of your notes, write this to say it's either you are given 2 points or coordinates. Secondly, you might be given, let's say, 1 point and again answer. Yes. So obviously, if you are given 2 points, it means they want the answer. But if you are given 1 point and answer, that means they want you to find the other point. What is the answer? So the answer is either you are given the distance, or it's either you are given, let's say, the x value of the midpoint and the y value of the midpoint. It depends on the question. We will have a look at those. And then when it comes to the gradient formula, that's if you are given maybe 1 point and the answer being the gradient itself, where you will then need to calculate the other point. Thanks very much, honorable member, for asking that question. Can you see? It now helped us to derive a summarized answer to that question. Remember, guys, I think I do need to emphasize this point to say Tando the Matandos. The reason why I like this type of lessons where everyone is attended is because through your engagement, through your questions, I am able to learn myself, and also I am able to derive some important information that are added to my notes. And again, we are able to share as learners different methods that you guys are learning at school, as opposed to a private lesson where the knowledge is limited to what I know and also limited to what you know. So, most importantly, please do make sure to take this type of lessons very seriously. And it helps a lot when you try and give me the wrong answers, because I always say the reason why I got distinctions in mathematics, it's because I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of correctable mistakes. So, most importantly, never feel ashamed of making any mistake. That's how you learn. I had to make it a point that I make as many mistakes as possible. I invested much of my time into making mistakes, and from those mistakes, that's how I learned. So now I'm pretty much sure that this summarizes the answer to your question. Who was that honorable member? I think it was Chantel Chinyani. Are you answered, honorable member? I think if she says yes, then I'm going deeper. Are you answered, honorable member?
Yes, I am.
100%. So now let's quickly go into this part, a inclination of a line. Inclination of a line. What exactly are we talking about? Inclination of a line. I'm about to speak English. I'm not sure whether it's English or English or English, but whatever that it is, listen very carefully. Angle formed with the horizontal in an anti-clockwise direction is what we call inclination of a line. Angle formed with the horizontal in an anti-clockwise, it's what we call angle of inclination. Yes, I think I've said it correctly. So sometimes it's in most cases where something, when explained by making use of words, it doesn't fully make sense. But I'm going to do something of which you will realize why mathematics is very nice. You don't need to be an English guru to fully understand mathematics. You just need to be able to interpret a drawn diagram. Because for me, I used to struggle when something was explained by making use of words, because my English was English. I said something there, and this is what I'm going to say. I'm just not sure if Hamisa is there to fill in the missing word. You get it. If you don't get it, forget about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, angle formed with the horizontal in an anti-clockwise direction. Okay, this is what happens. So, we have two types of directions. You need to be aware of that. Remember, a clock, I think you guys call it a watch, but let's say it's a clock. In which direction does these things rotate? In the clockwise direction. Clockwise direction. Clockwise direction. Clockwise direction. Clockwise. 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 Meaning anything in the opposite direction is anti-clockwise direction. So now from that statement, I said angle formed with the horizontal. Okay, obviously, this is the angle that we are referring to. What is the horizontal? This is the line, which is the horizontal line. This angle, is it formed in an anti-clockwise or in the clockwise direction? I said in an anti-clockwise direction. That is why I'm going to have that line with an arrow in an anti-clockwise direction. So this is what we call an angle of inclination. So remember, guys, I might not need to emphasize what I've just explained and say, remember, this lesson is being recorded and is going to be posted tomorrow where you guys can catch up. So that was the first example that you needed to be aware of. Maybe let me try and indicate with that type of a line, which is a straight line. Maybe let's say this is the graph of Bra Georgia, and you know very well that it's therefore going to be called G being G of X. Hey, this is what we call the Cartesian plane having the X and Y axis. Obviously, that point there being the origin, being that point where your vertical and horizontal axis intersect. Here comes a question. Where or how do we represent that angle of inclination? That angle, we said it is the angle which is formed with the horizontal. This is the horizontal. So is it this angle or is it this angle? Remember, it's an angle formed with the horizontal in an anti-clockwise direction. So that means it is going to be this angle. It could be angle alpha. Most importantly, angle formed in an anti-clockwise direction. So you might need to remember something very quickly. With these two examples that I've given, I want to make you guys aware of something so that you realize as a mathematician, you need to be thinking at all the times. So you have this angle. The question is this angle greater than or less than 90 degrees? That's a question. Anyone who would like to respond to that question?
Can you please repeat the question?
So this angle of inclination, is it greater than or less than 90 degrees?
It is less than 90 degrees.
100%, because it is only greater than 90 degrees if it is beyond that. So this one, greater than or less than?
Greater than.
100%. So this one, it is obviously a greater than, because you can see it started from there, from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, up to 90, and then it went beyond 90. But this one, from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, it looks like it's somewhere closer to 45. It's less than 90. So remember, this angle plus that angle, it has to give you 180 degrees, meaning this angle plus that angle, it has to give you 180 degrees. That is why sometimes you might be given this being referred to as theta, and then maybe this one as beta, or otherwise alpha, and then this one beta. You just need to be aware that if you are given this one, never regard this as your angle of inclination. So let's say, for example, for some other reason, you are given something similar to that. Let's say they are saying this is 37 degrees. This is not angle of inclination. Angle of inclination is this one. So that is why you will say, you know, this is 180. Then you subtract that angle. Whatever remains, it is this portion, which is your angle of inclination. But for now, Bantu Bagiti, do not worry that much. Do not stress that much. Don't panic. What I'm doing in today's lesson is just to make you aware of everything that you need to know, everything that you need to remember. It only going to make sense when we solve for exam type of question papers. That is why I always say never miss a lesson where I do an introduction, because through that lesson you will then be able to understand when I solve for exam type of question papers. And most importantly, if you happen to miss that lesson, make sure to catch up so that you will be following. So now that's all that I wanted you guys to be aware of. So I want to actually remind you of something very much important. The gradient, which can be written as, let's say, a word, a gradient. We know that it is represented by that small letter m, which is a change in y over change in x. And I just explained that this is delta y, which means y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This is something that I want you guys to be aware of. This formula, it is the same as this trig ratio, being tan angle. Note it down as part of your notes, meaning I'm now going to make a conclusion to say, under analytical geometry, you might need to remember that tan angle, it doesn't matter whether that angle they use angle theta, they use angle beta, they use angle alpha, or otherwise angle timber. It doesn't really matter that much. You just need to know that tan angle. That is why, to generalize, I'm just going to use this symbol to say tan angle, it's equals to the gradient being y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's what you need to always remember. But u-angle ungena phi manje? Lo angle lo ungena phi? Ungena la. Njengoba bengisho ngithe bantu bakithi, you might have a line there where you are having an angle of inclination. Somehow, examiner is going to derive some questions based on that. For example, since we know this is a straight line which might be having a gradient, let's say for some reason the gradient of this line is positive 2. An examiner says, determine an angle of inclination. This is the formula that you use. You know that your gradient is that. So it's more like you're going to say tan of angle, it's equals to 2. And then now to get that angle of inclination, you know very well that this is where you say a second function of tan 2 or arctan 2. And then the answer that you get, it is your angle of inclination. That's where this angle comes in. Most importantly, examiner is going to try to be tricky and say this is a line having a gradient of maybe negative 3 over 2, just as an example. And they say for graph of Brahma-Franco, let's say this one was the graph of H for Chloe. So now this is for the Mafrancos. Determine the angle of inclination. Someone is going to say tan of angle, it's equals to, obviously the gradient is negative 3 over 2. And they do that second function of tan negative 3 over 2, and they get a negative angle. Let me just assume and say negative 39 degrees, and they say this is the angle of inclination. An angle in a form of a negative, it is not an angle of inclination. This angle, it tells you that for this line, the angle that you got is actually this one, being a 39 degrees. Angle of inclination is an angle formed with the horizontal in an anti-clockwise direction. So that means the angle that examiner is looking for, it is not this one, but it is this one. How are you then going to get that? That's why we say, this is a straight line being 180 degrees. So you are going to say 180 degrees, you minus that angle, which is 39. It is going to give you an angle of inclination. I'm just not sure if you guys understood what I've explained up to this point. Maybe let me not go deep for now and just ask if you guys understood all that was explained up to this point. Precious Pagis, are you sure, honorable member, I'm not losing you there? I see we've got Lerato on the line. Amanda is also there. We've got Spuda. Busisiwe is there. Hey, the undercover is there as well. Undercover, are we doing okay that side?
No, I'm not an undercover, but we are doing well. I just wanted to verify something. The reason you used 180 is that the line in a straight line are equals to 180, or a line in a triangle are equals to 180. So we take the 180 minusing with the given angle or the angle we would have found.
Okay. Then I think just to clarify that part, let me try to see if I can summarize that one. A very good question there, honorable member. So it's more like you are going to be having two situations. The first situation where you are going to have a negative gradient, and the second situation where you are going to have a positive gradient. Remember, on a Cartesian plane, if you guys still remember when we're doing the functions, we said all the lines ending in the first and the third quadrants will always have positive gradients. Meaning, the moment you start having a positive gradient, when you use this formula, obviously you are going to say tan angle of a positive gradient. So when you calculate your angle, you're going to find a positive value. So now positive value means angle of inclination. Maybe let's keep it that way and say positive value means what is it? Angle of inclination. But now, in a case of a negative gradient, that's where you have a straight line ending in the second and a fourth quadrant. I'm sure you guys still remember that. To say that's where you'll be having negative gradients. So now, when you use this formula of tan angle, it's equals to a gradient, you are going to therefore say tan angle is equals to negative gradient. And I'm telling you now, it will always give you a negative angle. So because you realize it gives you a negative angle, that means the angle that you got is actually this one, which is going to be less than a 90 degree. So always when you realize you're dealing with negative gradient, you should have your formula ready to say 180 degrees minus whatever angle that you're going to get. It is going to give you that angle of inclination. You only pull out this source the moment you realize you're dealing with a negative gradient. But for this one of a positive gradient, it's going to give you a positive answer, which is the angle of inclination. But this one, it's going to give you a negative gradient, which you know it is not a angle of inclination, but you will need to say 180 minus that so that you know what that angle is. I'm not sure if you remember, Moleboge, you just reminded me of something. My knowledge on this chapter called Euclidean geometry is very, very limited. Reason to that is because during my time, I did not do that chapter. It wasn't included in the syllabus. And it is for that reason why I managed to find an educator from a private school who does mathematics, who has got over 10 years of experience teaching mathematics together with accounting. So he will be joining me very soon, hopefully early next month, where he will be doing those complicated chapters. So I'm saying it's complicated because I haven't done it myself, but I'm pretty much sure that he will break it down to the simplest way possible. So, what I know, Moleboge, is that there's this straight line of which the angle is 180. It's 0 degrees and then it's 180 degrees this side. I think it's called a supplementary angle or something of that nature, whereby if you have a line, for example, in that way, they say this angle plus that angle, it gives you 180 degrees. So it's more like they're saying if you move from this angle and you go up to this angle, it's whatever value of which if you continue up to this line, you end up having that straight line, which is 180 degrees. So that means to move from here to here, it's 180 degrees. So if you have a line of that nature, if you say since from here to there it's 180 degrees, you minus this portion, it's going to therefore give you that remaining angle there. So I tried, Shem, ngizamile ukuyichaza lento le. Ngicabanga ukuthi ilibandla lakaNkulunkulu liyizwile futhi ngamandlebe amabili. Did it make sense, honorable member?
No, it did. I understood you, but I had that concept that you are speaking about. Hence, I was asking that is it because, but now I understand.
Okay, 100%. And I'm pretty much sure that our other honorable members, they did understand that part. But maybe before I move on to the next part of this lesson, I just want to quickly confirm, is it everyone who understood what I've explained there, or Sir? Charlotte uthulile lapho tsotlhe di apere tshiamo kgotsa nnyaa?
Sir, I have a question.
Oh, there's a question coming through. Honorable member, on what point are you rising?
Sir, so can we conclude by saying that if your graph has a negative angle, in a sense, you will always get a negative acute angle, which you have to kind of add with 180 and then get the angle that you're looking for?
Hey, you nailed it. You nailed it, Ntombo. You say if you have a negative gradient, I think you mentioned a negative angle, but I'm sure you wanted to say, if you have a negative gradient, you are going to get an answer which is a negative acute angle, of which you need to therefore either plus it with 180 or either do it the manual way and say 180 minus that acute angle, and it's going to give you what we call an angle of inclination. So that means this line is what we call inclination of line, or it's what we call the line of inclination. And then from that line of inclination, we have that angle, which is called angle of inclination. I'm not sure if honorable members understand what we are trying to do there. Sinesethu linganiso Tando Stewart, Tando Stewart. Tando, do you understand, honorable member?
Sir,
Tembala
understand.
Mahomsha. Batleng, do you understand? Are you sure? Temba.
Sir,
Yes. I think that was a yes to a question of do you understand? Hey, I'm not sure if honorable members. Okay, so now we are about to move on to the last part of this lesson. Let's see. I think I'll need to remove everything. Yes, I will need to remove everything. And then now we move on to that one, determining an equation of a straight line. So let's see. We are having a general formula saying y it's equals to mx plus c. I'm telling you guys, determining an equation of a straight line is one of the easiest things to do under analytical geometry. So let's see. How many things do we need in order to determine an equation of a straight line? Bantu bakithi, I just said analytical geometry is a game of two things. It's a game of two things. What are the two things that you might need? Obviously, as I've indicated, it's either you've got 2 points or 1 point. And in this case, you will need the gradient again. So it's going to be a point and a gradient. It is as easy as that. It is as easy as that. I think this part is what you will fully understand when we solve for some questions. But one thing for sure, I'm pretty much sure that everyone is aware of the process that you follow to determine an equation of a straight line, because you firstly need to determine that, and then from there you use any point that you like to determine the C value. So to determine an equation is really just to find the M and the C, then you write it in the standard form. So that is why I might not invest much of our time into that, but remind you of something very, very, very much important, ladies and gentlemen. This is very much important, and I can promise you now, Pabi the Baba Lows, to say all that you learned in today's lesson, it's enough for you to get at least 90% in this question of analytical geometry. You will see when we discuss the question that was sent in the group. So starting from tomorrow, we are now solving for exam type of question papers. That's what we'll be doing until we complete this chapter. And then from there, that's when you guys will be writing a test. Most importantly, make sure that you are in the home page so that you'll be able to participate and write a test where I'm going to be able to see where you guys are struggling. Okay, so remember guys, in every lesson we've got what we call the code. So the code is where at the end of each lesson you comment with that specific code so that when your parent says it's the honorable member attending parliament, then we are able to scroll up and see that no, the honorable member wasn't sleeping in parliament, they were making the laws. Okay, so the code for today, you will just mention a word that you heard me mentioning so many times in this lesson. It could be bantu bakiti, it could be very, very much important, it could be hey, whatever that you heard me mentioning so many times is the code for the day. I'm sure someone would be confused as to exactly what is the code for today. So just remember that. Last point. They say 4 parallel lines. Colofelo, Philadelphia, they say for parallel lines. M1 is equals to M2. Remember, M referring to the gradient. So they're saying for lines which are parallel. Remember, parallel lines will never meet or cross. Same WhatsApp group. Those are the parallel lines. So if you are having this line and they say the gradient of this line is 0.7, and they say this is line 1, and they say this is line 2, and they say line 1 is parallel to line 2, that means automatically the gradient of line 1 is equals to the gradient of line 2, meaning the gradient of this line is also 0.7. I'm pretty much sure that honorable members understand that one. Remember, in case if you've got a question, feel free to rise and say on a point of order, and you will be recognized, honorable member. Okay. Leslie, my Leslies, this is what they say. For perpendicular lines, gradient of line 1, when you multiply it with the gradient of line 2, I'm telling you, they are always going to give you -1. I'm sure you guys are writing some notes. Note down that. So that means if you have that line, Tando, have you got a question, honorable member? Was it a question coming through?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to ask, when you times M1 with M2, is it always -1? Like it never changes, right? It's forever -1.
Forever and ever and ever. When you multiply the gradient of line 1 and the gradient of line 2 will always be -1. So it's more like this is a formula. Let's make a conclusion to say this is a formula, and also this is a formula. So the question is, this is a formula for what? It's a formula for the lines which are perpendicular to each other. How do you know lines are forming? That's if they have a 90-degree angle there. Or otherwise, if you multiply the gradient of this line and that line, if they give you -1, automatically it means they are perpendicular. But if you have something of this nature, can you see? Line 1 and line 2, they look like they are perpendicular to each other. How can we prove it if they are perpendicular or not? You will need to find the gradient of this line and find the gradient of this line. Then you say line 1 times line 2. If they give you -1, it means they are perpendicular to each other. If they don't give you -1 and maybe they give you -1,01, it means they are not perpendicular because they are not giving you exactly -1. Tando the Matandos. Does it make sense, honorable member?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Remember, guys, someone might have heard me saying Tando the Matandos and use that as the code for today. So, Tando, don't be surprised when everyone says Tando the Matandos. Remember, the code is whatever that you heard me mentioning so many times in today's lesson. So, I'm telling you, Bantu Bagiti, we have covered this, and that. This is what I'm going to tell you now. At my school, in most of your schools, you might find that because of the program which was made, or what you call the teacher's program, what we've just covered in less than an hour, it might take you guys a week or two. Where lesson 1 they focus on this, lesson 2 they focus on that, lesson 3 they focus on that, and then upcoming lessons you just do an exercise, then you move on to something else or you do a test. But what I've realized during my time and even now is that the mind is a very powerful tool. You don't need the whole week to study this thing. You just need a good explainer. You just need a very good study guide, which you can find in our library, where you can study this in just a day, fully understand everything, and then from there, you'll be ready to start answering exam type of question papers. And you do that for like 2 to 4 days, treating different question papers. And most importantly, don't study without having a memo. Do not study without having a memo at all the times. Make sure that you've got a memo so that when you try to solve something, you are able to refer to the memo. If you want to know that you fully understand, when you do something and you get it wrong and you refer to the memo and you understand how it's done on the memo, just know, kancane kancane uyavela. But the moment you see yourself failing to understand the question, the moment you see yourself not being able to approach that particular question, the moment you see yourself referring to the memo and still not understanding anything, just make sure that you might need to catch up from my previous lessons. It could be my 2022 lesson, my 2023 lesson being this one. Even if you go to my 2022 lessons, you will find exactly the same content being explained, but obviously differently because I don't cram these lessons. I just prepare, and then from there, I speak the word of God. And people start falling. Just like you, that side, people start laughing. So it's more like, in my case, I don't make you fall because you're already seated down. You just laugh. But most importantly, temper the timbers. As a mathematician, when you laugh, you don't do that one of kwa 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 nie 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 nie. Thank you. So as a mathematician, you just say ahi, or you just say ka. You are done. You are done over the weekend. That's when you can finish off the laughter. because that's when you'll be relaxed. But now we are talking important stuff. We want to end a load shedding. We want to make sure that we deliver the services to the masses of our people. There's no time to sleep, no time to be laughing. Make sure that we spend as much time as possible into discussing serious matters. I'm pretty much sure that honorable members understand all of that. So very, very quickly, let's go back to that question paper that was sent in the group. I want to show you guys some miracle. I think we'll just need to spend less than 10 minutes on this one, just to give you guys an idea of how you are going to apply all this information that you learned in today's lesson. But maybe before I do that, is there anyone who's got a question before we quickly review that 2022 exam question paper? Anyone who's got a question? Tilly, are you okay that side, honorable member? Do you not want to rise on a point of order?
No, sir.
Hey. Okay. Minenhle. Kuhamba kahle lapho. Konke kuhamba kahle. Kwazile makwazisi. Precious, are we doing okay that side?
Back to the line of the
Yes,
thing, the
yes,
inclination, but it's fine. I'll catch up because I came late.
Okay. Honorable member has joined a bit late and she knows the rules. If you joined late, you just make sure that you remain for the last part of the lesson, and then from there you're going to catch up. So as honorable member will be catching up, she's going to ask the questions on my next lesson. That's if she managed to catch up and have some questions. But Umidama Umis, I'm not happy with your silence, honorable member. Are you sure you understand everything that is being discussed in today's lesson? Umidama Umis, Charlotte Mutlava, Charlotte, uthulile lapho. Where? In Free State. Charlotte, awufuna ukukhuluma nami namhlanje, kwenze njani? Ungikwatele?
Akakwata ke teng.
Okay. So, I'm just going to make an assumption that we are all on the same page, and this is what I'm going to do, honorable members. So, this is the question that I'm referring to. I know every time when I bring this screen, it goes blurry, but maybe let me try and do this. Okay, let me quickly try to make sure that I can do a portrait, and then I'll try to zoom into these, and then from there we have a look at those questions just to discuss. We're not solving anything in today's lesson, just for the purpose of discussing. So let's see. Question number 3. In the diagram, A being a point having those coordinates, B being a point having those coordinates. Remember, examiner tries to be tricky by giving you fractions because they do know very well that you guys get confused the moment you are dealing with fractions. So C is just a point without the coordinates, and E is 6 and -4. They say these are the vertices. Most importantly, the word vertices simply refers to the corners. So just make sure that you don't get confused by the question itself. And again, when they say the vertices, you think examiner is trying to be tricky there. Vertices, the corners of a trapezium. A trapezium having BA. Hey, can you see those two lines? We do know very well that the moment we see those, it means parallel. So that means BA being parallel to CE. Okay. D is the y-intercept. D is the y intercept. Remember, the word intercept simply refers to y-cut, y-touch, or a y-what? Yeah, y-cut, y-touch, yes, or y-intercept, which is point D. Y-intercept of CE. Where is CE? C, oh, there's E. This is point D. Okay, makes sense. And CD. CD. CD is equals to DE. So that means from there to this equals to from the. Okay. So now that I've read the statement, this is what I want to make you guys aware of. It's in most cases, umi them are umis. It's in most cases where the given statement can also be represented diagrammatically. So that means what I've just read, it is represented diagrammatically. So you can see already they've given this sign. Can you see BA? Can you see a CE? This is an indication that these two lines are parallel to each other, meaning the gradient of this line is equals to the gradient of that line, which is what we've just discussed. Okay, let's see. We've got that, and that. We've got C, D, and E. Yes, yes. Examiner is trying to play some games here. So, can you guys see with them doing this and that? That means from C to D, it's equals to this to that. You might not realize that with you getting the coordinates of D and with you being given this. I'm not sure, Shelly the Charlotte, if you realize that the moment you start getting the coordinates of D, it's more like you have the middle point values, whereby you can now use the midpoint formula if you want to calculate the coordinates of that. Because you've got two things. What are those two things? You've got one coordinate and you've got an answer, meaning you can calculate the other coordinate. Okay, maybe let's try to have a look at those questions very quickly, and then from there we will check if we can get 80% or at least 80% of that question, which is out of 20. Imagine 21 marks. Analytical geometry, you guys need to get 100% on that question. Remember, guys, to the new learners who have just joined my lesson for the very first time today, you might have been told that the lesson takes 1 hour. But it's in most cases where it will be at least 1 hour. Reason to that, I'm not limiting my lessons to 1 hour because I need to achieve a certain goal, which is making sure that I've delivered an intro, then I just give you an idea of what the intro was all about. Most importantly, you guys are in grade 12. I'm just going to assume that, let's say, you guys are 13 years old in grade 12. Not sure if that is true, but let me just assume that. So that means you've got less than 1 year to prepare for the rest of your life, where God has allocated you an extra 8 years. So imagine you've got only a year to prepare for the rest of your life, meaning you need all the available information in order to use to make sure that you pass with distinctions. It is possible. I know it is possible. Only if you pay full attention to all the details. This is a point that I want to emphasize. Matric is easier than grade 10 and grade 11. That is why there are learners who get 100% for example, for their maths. they say they got 100% in matric. But when you go to grade 10, you will find that the maximum was maybe 80% or otherwise less, which is an indication that grade 10 and 11 are a bit tricky and difficult, but grade 12 is the easiest of them all. So in case if you failed while you were in grade 12, in case if you are upgrading because you did not pass your mathematics well, in case if it feels like grade 12 is difficult, listen very carefully. Bandla la kaNkulunkulu, ngicela limmamele. Your problems, Thando the Matandos, are not in grade 12. Your problems are in grade 10 and 11. That is why you need to attend my grade 10 and 11 lessons, because that's where your problems are. That's where your problems started. But you did not take those problems seriously. You only started being serious in grade 12, and it was too late. That is why I always say, if you failed your grade 12, how long did you have to prepare for your examinations? You had a whole year and you got 3%. But now, if you had the whole year to prepare, why would you give yourself 6 months to prepare for your final exam? Okay, if you had the whole year to prepare and you got, let's say, 3%, if you are now giving yourself 6 months, what is your targeted percentage? To be realistic, would that be achievable if you give yourself less time to prepare for the rest of your life? Do not rush. I learned this from some of my friends who passed, and they passed very well and had to take some gap year. And today they are in the medical field and they are medical doctors. Simply because they did not rush. Even though the heart says, my fellow honorable members are doing their first years, fellow honorable members are adverts or wherever, and I'm stuck here trying to read. Do not put yourself under pressure, because this is what you're preparing for. Don't give yourself less time to prepare for those so many years that you'll still have to live. Let me not confuse you guys even further, but I'll just leave it there and say it all depends on your understanding. But I had to make you guys aware of that, to say how long did you have and how much did you get? How much of time are you giving yourself to prepare? Most importantly, what is your target? I'll leave it there for now. I think on our next event, where we invite a guest, we will discuss that. I've also indicated that one of my learners who got a bursary and going to start advanced studying, gynecology or gynecologist, something of that nature. She will also form part of our next event, just to keep you guys highly motivated. Okay, back to the business of the day, the issue of ESCOM. Let's see. 3.1, it says calculate the gradient of AB. The gradient of AB, how many marks? 2 marks. So it's easy. You know how to calculate the gradient using that formula. Let's move on to 3.2. Determine the equation of CE in the form of y is equals to mx plus c. Remember, I'm just going to be quick on this one. On our next lesson, we are going to answer those questions. So I'm just giving you a guide in terms of how you would approach those. During your spare time, give it a try and see how far you can go with that. So Now, next question. They are talking about C and E. Hey, seems like there's going to be a problem there. What do I know about line C? I only know that. And I know to determine an equation of a straight line, I need two things. Hey, remember, they said this line is parallel to that line, meaning if I got the gradient here to be 2, that means also the gradient for this line is going to be 2. Now, can you see? I know two things. I've got the gradient, I've got a point, then I can determine that. That's how you work out that one. So now calculate the coordinates of C. Where is C? Hey, there is C. Yes, yes. How am I going to calculate that? Because yes, yes. Yes, yes. Analytical geometry is nice, Bantu Bakiti. I'm telling you, because they said from C to D is equals to from C to E. And from this equation of that, if you guys remember, let's say is y is equals to 2, maybe because I got 2, there's going to be 2x. Obviously, it's going to be negative. Let's say maybe negative 6. So you remember this being the C value, it tells us more about the vertical shift, meaning this line from the origin, it shifted by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, meaning this point, it is 6, not just 6, but negative 6. So that means automatically the coordinates of D, it's actually 0 and negative 6, meaning I can now use the midpoint formula to calculate the coordinates of C, because I've got an answer being the x value. I've got a point, I just substitute to get another point. I do the same, I've got an answer, I know the y value, and then I can calculate the y value. So that's how examiner will try to be tricky, but it all comes down to that information that I've explained to you, to say for gradient formula, for distance formula, for whatever, you only need two things. Very quickly, let's move on to the next question. Area of quadrilateral ABCD. Remember, I think quadrilateral, it refers to a shape having four sides. So that means it's in most cases where under this chapter, when you are given something, it will in most cases be a quadrilateral having four sides. Then you just need to be aware that something having four sides, it could be this shape being a rectangle. It could be, let's say, maybe a square. Otherwise, it could be that type of a shape looking like that. So that means the moment they start talking about an area, you know, most an area, it's either it's half a length times breadth. That's if it's an area of a triangle. And then for a square, you can just say area is length times breadth. So that means you might need to be smart. You might need to be smart and say, okay, for me to calculate the area of that shape, let me maybe separate it into two parts and say, I'm going to say length times breadth, which is an area of that shape being either a square or a rectangle. And then this one being a triangle, being half L times that. That means I'm going to say that distance obviously being this one, and I also find that one. Then I just say a half of length times that. Then whatever answer that I get here, I'm going to plus it with an answer that I got there. Then is the area of that quadrilateral. This is the type of thinking that is required at varsity, Bantu Bagiti, whether it's varsity or college. But I used to apply this kind of information during my engineering studies. But there you get some complicated stuff. I'm telling you, if it feels like this is complicated, hey, because you can easily collapse at varsity level in case if you're thinking it's not of this standard. Things can get very tricky there. Moleboge, it got tricky to an extent where when I was given money for food, I had to save that money. I think I saved about 350. And I made sure that I never use that money. I would rather sleep with hunger instead of me using this money. You know why? It's because it was so tough, such that I had to make sure that at least I have money to go home. That's how tough it was. At least I have money to go home. Imagine things being tough, you fail. My first test at varsity, I got this. I will never forget. And I woke up from that day. I realized I was sleeping. I went in with high school mentality, and 3% humbled me. And that has led to saving that, just to make sure that I have money to get me back to Limpo. It was tough. It was tough, Bantu Bagiti. So if you think high school is tough and you say, I want to study actuarist, or I want to become an engineer, I want to become a medical doctor, I want to be a pilot, I'm telling you, you will study the pilot, whatever. And instead of taking people to Russia, this is you going to Malawi, flying people to Malawi. And once you are in the working field, there's no time for corrections. People pay to go to Russia. And this is you going to heaven. Hey, ongathi kusasoshuba. Guys, please make sure to wake up. Very quickly, 3.4. If K is the reflection of E in the y-axis, write down the coordinates of K. This is where you need to remember that when you reflect something, if it's about the y-axis, you take this point from there, and then you take it and put it this side. So let me give you guys an example. You might find that this point, let's say where x is 2 and then y is 3. When you reflect this point about the y-axis, it's more like you are just transferring it from that side to this side, because it's just that. So you will realize that something actually changes. And what changes? What changes is actually the x value. It no longer becomes positive, but it's negative. So it's more like if you are having the coordinate being x and y, if they say something reflects about the y-axis, it's actually the x value that becomes negative. But if you are having that and they say something reflect, let's say, about the x-axis, so this is what happens, or otherwise that, then you realize x remains as it is. It's only the y value that changes the sign. This is what I learned during my time in high school, and they took out this chapter where they introduced that one of Euclidean geometry, where I was saying our new teacher will be joining us early next month to take you guys through that chapter. I'll still be around, so it's more like during the week, first lessons will be mine, and then second lessons will be his. An advantage to that is that as you'll be studying, for example, this chapter, he will be taking you through on a different chapter with the aim of trying to cover the syllabus as early as possible. And for those of you guys who are on extra Saturday classes, you know very well that we have started with trigonometry, and we are now at a stage where we'll be starting with exam type of question papers. For those of you who are not on those extra weekend classes, do not worry. That chapter, it will still come on the Monday to Friday lessons. The only difference is those on extra classes, they have an opportunity to study ahead and cover as many chapters as possible. It is specially designed for those who will be writing in May, June. So I'm pretty much sure that this part made some sense. Yes, there is a question which says, calculate the perimeter of triangle KEC. Bantu bakithi, we can't teach you everything, as the say says. Angeke sikufundise yonke into. Ezinye izinto umele ukuthi usaze or umele ukuthi usikhumbule. Bantu bakithi, I just said your problems might not be in grade 12. Someone who doesn't know what a perimeter is, or someone who doesn't know how to calculate a perimeter, that means you won't touch that question. But a perimeter, it simply refers to the sum of all the sides. For example, if you know from here to here, let's say it's 2 units, there to there it's 4 units, from there to there, let's say it's 2 units, from there to there, let's say also it's 4 units. When you talk about the perimeter, you say side 1 plus side 2 plus side 3 plus side 4. That is the perimeter. 3 and 4. So that means the perimeter of this shape is actually 2 plus 4 plus 2 plus 4, which is equals to what? This is 8, 10, 12. So that means the perimeter is 12. So can you see, Tando the Matandos, that is a smart way for examiner to make you to use the distance formula. They won't say calculate the distance, or they won't say use the distance formula. They will just say calculate the perimeter, knowingly that for you to calculate the perimeter, you need to know the distance from there to there, so that you can plus it with the distance from there to there, plus it with the distance from there to there. Remember, this is the gradient, not the distance. Distance from there to there, distance from there to there. Then you just plus, and that is the perimeter. Remember, guys, this is a monologue. I'm not talking to anyone. I'm talking to myself. I wonder what you guys are listening. It seems like it's interesting listening to someone talking to themselves. So I'll just continue and conclude with that last question, which says, calculate the size of K, C, Kepisana, E. This thing, Bantu Bakit, if something is written like this, they are referring to an angle of C. In triangle having these 3 letters, that's what that thing is written. It will never be written in that way where they are referring to that angle there. If they want you to calculate an angle of E, they're going to write this E in the middle. Meaning, in triangle KEC, what is that angle E? But in this case, they want angle C. That's how you interpret a mathematical expression or a mathematical term or a mathematical whatever. So let's see, which triangle are they talking? They're talking about K. Hey, where is K? Oh, K ungena la. I'm sure someone was wondering, ungena PK. You remember they said this thing doing that along that. So that point, it is obviously going to be somewhere there. Examiner will try by all means to be tricky. Just need to make sure that you keep. So obviously, you do know very well that you are actually having a right-angled triangle. How do I know? Because this point, it reflects about the y-axis. So that means this same y value, if it's -4 there, even here, it's still going to be the same y value. And what is it? This x value is the one that changes and becomes a negative. So that means this is what you are having at that point there. So I'm not sure if you guys realize this is what we are having. We're having point E, we're having point K, and then we're having point C, and this is the angle that they want you to calculate. For me, I would try to find either that distance and also that distance. Since I know this is 90 degrees, you can use a trig ratio that has, what is it, a opposite over adjacent in order to calculate that. In case if you are not able to calculate that and that, you can maybe use theorem of Pythagoras if necessary for you to determine whatever that you know that it will end up giving you this angle. So what I like about analytical geometry is that there are multiple ways to work out certain problems. You can do it this way, one can do it differently. Imagine out of 150, already you have 21 marks. 14% already. You just need to score more marks on those easy chapters like trigonometry and also what is it? Trigonometry and what is that chapter, Bantu Bakiti? That easy one. It's normally question number 1. Statistics. No, is it? No.
Statistics.
Yes, I think it's statistics. Yes. You can easily score some marks there, and you score some marks here, then you score some marks on trig, and then you know you are closer to getting distinction. So I think I'm going to end it here, but I'm just going to allow a few more questions, and then I will conclude our lesson for today. Anyone who's got a question, Bantu Bakiti. Precious Pakis, uthulile ntombo, konke kuhamba kahle. Is everything in order that side? Zbuda. I see Busisiwe Ngcobo is there. Sidumile. Sidumile Kwane. Are we okay that side, honorable member? I think the two of you, just to confirm if we are all on the same page, then you know you can't afford to miss the next lesson. I think it's on Friday. So guys, do you allow me to sign out, or is there someone who's got a question there?
No questions on my side.
No question on my side, thank you.
I think
No
that was an indication that all was clear. So for those of you guys who are attending for the very first time, I'm telling you now, it is possible that you can be taught something and have a better understanding at the end of that particular lesson. You don't necessarily need to follow the structure that is being followed at school, because once you get to varsity, you need to be creative. You need to make sure that you learn as many things as possible within a short space of time. So ladies and gentlemen, I do thank you very much for joining. Remember the code. My name is Desmond, and I'm out.